These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs. We are proud to stand with you.
The success of tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
MarketJournal Television for Agricultural Business Decisions is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Bryce Duskett, and thank you very much for joining us today on Market Journal. Welcome into the month of October. The fall harvest is in full swing across the region. We'll have more on harvest coming up on the show. Also featured this week, some considerations for producers when it comes to renewing cow-calf lease agreements. Barchart Senior Analyst Darin Newsom will join us to give us an in-depth look at the current trends impacting the grain markets. Plus, we'll spend some time reviewing weather with Eric Hunt, as all those stories are straight ahead. But let's begin here on Market Journal. We spend a lot of time talking about corn that is largely grown for feed and fuel. That's for good reason, as nearly all corn grown in the U.S. is used for animal feed, ethanol, or is exported to other countries. But a kernel of corn has to start somewhere to be planted. For today's In the Field update, we learn about the process of growing and harvesting seed corn. Starting out here in the field, Curtis Winters is the field production manager with Syngenta here at the location. Tell me, what makes this spot in Nebraska ideal for growing seed corn?
Sure. I would say this part of Nebraska, central Nebraska, lots of good soil, lots of good irrigation. With the Ogallala Aquifer here, provides us with an abundance of water. And I would say third, a lot of good growers to work with. We grow seed corn all the way from Chapman down to Hastings, Nebraska. And throughout, we partner with a lot of local growers and a lot of good base here.
Now, as we sit here, kind of the first week of October, you're actually wrapping up harvest. When did you begin?
So we started on October 7th. We've pretty much been picking almost every day. We ran into a couple spots where the corn wasn't necessarily dry enough. And so we had to wait for the corn to dry down. Thankfully, we had pretty favorable weather. Usually this time of the year, it's starting to cool off, but we've had some warmer days that helps the corn dry down.
For those not familiar with this process, might surprise them, the moisture you're trying to, when you're picking the corn, what moisture is that?
So it depends on the hybrid. Each hybrid is specific, and we do studies to know which ones are sensitive to drying and how much heat they can handle. On average, I would say below 34 we're trying to shoot for, but we can pick some as wet as 38.
Okay. Let's talk about the logistics of harvest. You've got the pickers, the carts, and the semis out here. How does all that come together?
Sure. So we partner with local farmers, and we contract them to get the equipment, and then they pick our seed corn acres. We run three pickers out of this site, and it's able to provide us enough of our daily intake.
Curtis Winters joining us as we're out here in the actual seed corn field. And up next, we're going to head to the facility where they make all this come together to become seed corn. We're now inside the plant, and joining us is the plant manager of this location, that is Ryan Peter. Appreciate you sitting down with us, Ryan, and giving us a full overview of what happens. And as we saw in the field, of course, the trucks leave, they travel a couple miles down the road, and the corn comes here. What comes next once it's offloaded?
Well, Bryce, we bring it into the site. We have 15 trucks, carriers that bring it on the site, 13 are local carriers. With that, we unload it at the receiving area, off the walking floors, walk it up through the process. It goes into our husking houses. In there, it's a grouping of rollers. It comes off and removes the husks. It goes onto tables, sorting tables. There we have a group of individuals that do the sorting. They look for quality. That's our first step in the process of looking for the quality, the rogue ears, things that don't belong in the process that happen. Also, they will send up materials that rehusk back up to the conveyors. From there, in the husking process, it will then go onto the conveyors. The husklage goes out through choppers, which goes to a local feed yard here by Phillips, and then the ears materials themselves go up to our dryers. We fill the dryers to a certain depth to maximize the quality of drying time per units per hour, and then from there we will shell the material, going through our sheller building, going through the bulk storage, We have about 1 million units worth of bulk storage, so we'll get that filled before the end of the season, and then we'll be ready to start packaging.
It'll look like the box behind us leaving this facility. How
Yes,
about that?
it will. Yeah, it will. So yes, we'll put it in wonderful looking boxes like that behind us, get it ready to go to the sales. We'll start that process here very shortly. We'll start that in October, begin shipping right away in this quarter to get the sales demands and get needs out there. So we'll begin that process now, and then we'll ship all the way from California to North Dakota and Texas from this specific site.
One of the things we learned with Curtis in the field was the moisture that they were picking corn at. And of course, the drying process here at the plant is an important step. What do you bring the corn down to drying before you shell it?
So we have a goal of 12.5 to 13.5% moisture. A little variation on that, but we really try to keep tight to that. That allows for the best vigor of the material later on, of the corn, the maturity as well. So we'll definitely stay focused on that. So usually 4 to 4.5 hours per point for a lot of our hybrids is what we're looking for through our dryers and our shelling process. So that's where we try to focus.
That's be pretty cool for you as the plant manager, but also those 40 year-round employees. You know, the seed corn you're putting into bags or bulk here, ultimately it could be planted just out your front door here in what certainly a heavy corn producing state that is Nebraska. Yes. Talk about that and the pride that you and the employees have in that.
Yeah, so I would definitely say we're also part of other community involvement with the communities close by with Aurora and Phillips. And so as we develop relationships with those areas and those entities, we also have 30 growers and 10 landlords in the area that we partner with. They can see the value in what they have on the farm and on the acre, as well as how we try to join the community and be a part of that. So there is a sense of pride and ownership in everything that they do with that, and they can see it as we have events in the area. So.
Thanks to Curtis and Ryan for sitting down with us to share those insights. I want to add this for you. As of 2023, 31 million bushels of corn were grown for seed purposes. To put that number into perspective, Nebraska's estimated to produce nearly 1.9 billion bushels of corn this year. Moving on now, grassland conservation is an important topic. Nebraska's diverse grasslands blanket more than half of the state. These grasslands serve multiple purposes, including providing homes for wildlife, recreational opportunities, and of course, creating grazing opportunities for livestock producers. That's why the grassland conservation was a topic of discussion for several University of Nebraska-Lincoln seniors this week. On Monday, students made their way into the field to learn about grazing systems and their purpose in grassland conservation efforts.
Decided to bring some steers over to graze our prairie planting in front of Hardin Hall. I'd say I got two goals with this. One, this prairie planting produces a lot of biomass. It was a wet, rainy growing season. And so what are our options to knock down that biomass? Prescribed burning is not a good option right here. Haying, we don't have the equipment for that. Grazing, these are all tools we use in grassland management. But more importantly is the teachable opportunities. We have a grassland undergraduate major, and we teach a course for grad students and seniors called Grassland Conservation. A lot of our graduates from natural resources, agronomy, grassland science, they'll end up getting jobs with state and federal agencies, helping to manage half of Nebraska's privately owned grassland. And so these students need to be able to know the tools for grassland management, conservation, grazing. They need to understand prescribed fire as a tool. They need to understand haying and the role of mowing. They need to understand the use of herbicides for noxious weeds. They need to know how to control expansion of woody encroaching species like red cedar. I want them to understand a little bit about herbivory in general, whether it's elk or bison or cattle or horses or goats, the role that herbivores play in grassland. But if we're going to have diverse, healthy grasslands into the future, they need to understand the concept of herbivory. So I gave an assignment to our seniors, and I said, spend 15 minutes, watch the cattle. I want you to write down 10 observations or questions. They don't need to be brilliant. You can even, some of them can even be artistic. You can draw a sketch or make a haiku poem or anything, but just watch the cattle for 15 minutes and come up with some observations and questions. I come at it, officially, that I said, this course for seniors is called grassland conservation. It's not called beef production. But I think they're gonna realize those are two sides of the same coin, right? Over 95% of those grasslands in Nebraska are privately owned. Say my goal is to ensure we have healthy, diverse grasslands. And we're gonna face a lot of challenges in the 21st century. We're gonna have to use all the tools in our toolbox. And by the way, beef production is a big part of that. And if they're not, if those ranches, if those private grasslands aren't economically resilient, well, then they're not going to be ecologically resilient. And the idea of a buffalo commons that floated a generation ago, that didn't go anywhere. Cattle and bison aren't that different in how they operate.
Always something new and exciting for students at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. If you'd like to learn more on this topic, we added some important links along with this story. Find them on the MarketJournal homepage. It is now time to turn our attention over to the markets. Between harvest being in full swing and new strikes happening in the shipping ports on the East Coast, there were a lot of current events testing the markets this week. Joining us to discuss those trends is Barchart Senior Analyst Darin Newsom. Here's our conversation from Thursday morning. Let's begin the conversation here talking about the port strike happening on the East Coast, up and down. I saw an estimate coming out for the American Farm Bureau showing $1.4 billion in an impact to ag trade every week that this continues. Of course, no exact idea of how long this will continue. Give me your thoughts on why this is not having a major impact on the major commodities we talk about here on the program.
To begin with, right, there's a lot of things going on, but if we just want to look at ag right off the bat, a lot of what the U.S. ships this time of year is soybeans, and a lot of those move off the Pacific Northwest. So, where we're talking about the East Coast is mostly an import. A lot of that's what we see. What we see there is imports. So we've got that as far as goods coming into the United States, and it could. I have heard where it stretches all the way from the East Coast down to Texas. So this does take the Gulf ports into account as well. And secondly, we just don't have a lot of soybean shipments at this time. We don't have a lot of corn. I mean, corn is shipping right now, but it's not the key time of year for U.S. corn exports. So I think for now, there's other issues as far as ag goes that are more important. Most notably, it's harvest season, and the weather looks, heading into another harvest weekend, weather looks favorable. Looks like it's going to be clear for the foreseeable future.
Corn seeing a bit of a nice bounce back as we kind of put in the harvest low, it looks like, looking back at the charts. Darin, you expecting any more movements on the corn front in the weeks ahead?
I think so. From a technical point of view, what we saw was corn went into a long-term uptrend. Corn futures, I should say, went into a long-term uptrend at the end of August, and it's been slowly gaining momentum. The real question now is, will the non-commercial side actually go long the market? Fundamentally, it doesn't seem to have a reason to. So a lot of what's been going on has just been non-commercial short covering without a lot of selling on top of it. So this has allowed us to go from the August settlement of 401 up through the round number 410, 420, and now 430 with the these 24 sites set on the 440 mark. We also have to remember that during October, for whatever reason, we see both December corn and November soybeans both rally during the month. Oddly enough, and coincidentally, this is also the month when the harvest price for U.S. Insurance is calculated using daily closes. So, there's a lot going on in October right now. Seems to be some mostly technical buying, fund buying. Not seeing the same thing in November soybeans. So most of it's going on in corn, most of it just funds moving to the sideline.
You're teasing up my next question, which was on the soybeans. I believe you note in your commentary you're a little bit seeing a bearish outlook for soybeans. Explain why that is.
In soybeans, I still think it's a good chance that they've put in their low. We don't have this clear of a technical picture on the soybean market, but what happens this time of year in soybeans, what kind of keeps a lid on potential rallies, is as we get deeper into harvest, U.S. producers like to sell soybeans and hold corn. So this puts more available supplies into the system at a time when demand's supposed to be picking up. But now let's go back to the port. I mean, the port situation. If we don't have, some of our export facilities ready, again, most of them still go out the Pacific Northwest. But if there's a little bit of a hiccup there, and if we're not really seeing the demand starting to materialize as far as actual exports go, then it kind of is offset. So soybeans don't have the same sort of bullish factors that we could talk about in corn. And in fact, we could actually see a bit more bearish situation because of these of the supplies becoming available. And we can certainly see this in the basis market as well.
Darin, some of our western Nebraska producers, well, their wheat's grown all across the state, but in particular, I hear from them. They like it when I ask you wheat questions. So size up kind of the wheat market, what you're seeing there.
Wheat is interesting in that, again, there's really no fundamental reason for it to be rallying, but we're seeing strong moves by all three markets: hard red winter, soft red winter, and hard red spring. And so again, what this looks like is funds are just wanting to go to the sidelines until we see, what develops, either more bullish fundamentals or less bullish fundamentals, whichever the way the wind seems to blow. But for now, they just want to move to the sidelines. There's too much uncertainty. There's too much opportunity in other market sectors. They can certainly look over, investment traders can certainly look over to energies, metals, even in the softs. Now, at some point, there's going to be more interest in new crop winter wheat. It's just not here yet. It probably won't be till next spring. We're already into planting season, and the market's basically shrugged its shoulders. We're just not seeing much activity over in the July contracts for either Kansas City or Chicago. So it may not be till next spring when new crop moves to the forefront. And for now, demand is it's okay. It's not outstanding. And we've got plenty of supplies on hand. So again, it's not a fundamental issue. It's more of a fund issue, as in so many other markets. They're just moving to the sidelines and rolling money over to other sectors.
We've covered corn, soybeans, and wheat now. Darin, let's wrap up with your thoughts on where we're at here in October. What kind of last-minute advice would you like to leave us with?
I think there's going to be a great deal of uncertainty, and we certainly have to acknowledge in early November the U.S. has another presidential election, and what we have to expect over this next month is a great deal of chaos from global players looking to make a political change here in the United States. A lot of what we've seen overseas in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, and even some of these situations here domestically, we could talk about the port strikes, are tied to the idea that political change needs to happen, or one particular side wants political change to happen. So this is only going to get worse. This is why gold continues to go up, even though it's at all-time highs. It continues to find buyers. So and it's going to have a ripple effect. It certainly should have a ripple effect on some of the ag markets and other markets that we're interested in.
All right, thanks to Darin for joining us on the broadcast. Well, it's time once again to get a check of what's happening in the world of weather with Market Journal's meteorologist, that is Eric Hunt. Eric, one of the stories this week has been looking back actually to last month and seeing just how dry it was.
Thanks, Bryce. No rain in sight pretty much for anybody in the state coming up here the next couple of weeks. If you're interested in the longer range forecast, though, I do offer a webinar every month, second Tuesday at 9 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Mountain Time. Register at the Crop Watch page shown here. Start the week off, though, at least Saturday. We have relatively high fire danger across most of the state, particularly across portions of southeastern Nebraska on Saturday morning, where we may have wind gusts over 40 miles an hour at times before the front arrives. After the front arrives, temperatures will drop off a little bit, probably getting in the mid-90s here across portions of southeastern Nebraska on Saturday before that front arrives, though. In terms of the overall upper pattern, no, we are basically stuck with this ridge across the northern portion of this continent for at least the next 10 days, probably even beyond that. That's going to help keep us relatively clear and certainly no precipitation. As basically shown here by the WBC, nowhere in Nebraska is expected any precipitation in the next week. I would kind of anticipate that being the case for the week following this one as well. In terms of temperatures, we are likely to see some frost across portions of western, and I would think probably even portions of north central and central Nebraska will have a chance of some frost on Monday morning. Temperatures everywhere else probably will get into the somewhere between the mid-30s and low to mid-40s. So a little bit cooler, but we'll be warming up though as we head later in the week. Particularly Wednesday through Saturday, we're likely to see temperatures well above average across the entire region. Highs should be 80s statewide, and it wouldn't surprise me if we don't have temperatures close to 90 degrees across the southern border as we head into Thursday and Friday of this next week. This outlook is expected to continue. Temperatures will probably remain very, very warm as we head to the middle of October as this ridge kind of stays put in place for a while. Precipitation also likely to be pretty low. I think this is probably a little bit optimistic in terms of what they're projecting here in the Southwest. This may come to fruition a little bit later in October, but right now I don't see any realistic chance of anywhere in Nebraska getting any precipitation until closer to October 20th, possibly beyond that. Hopefully I'm wrong on this one. In terms of drought monitor, again, we are seeing about half the state now with some form of drought, and we now have 24 counties in the state with severe drought. Nowhere's worse than that yet, but we're probably getting close to being D3 in a couple of spots as well. One of the reasons we've seen this is we now, preliminary evidence would suggest that we have seen the driest September on record across the state. It certainly officially was the driest on record in both Omaha and Norfolk. Soil moisture across this region is basically abysmal. Even if this isn't literally correct, directionally it's absolutely right. We are very, very dry across this entire region, and fire danger will remain an issue until we start getting some better moisture back in this region. Soil temperatures right now mostly in the 60s across the state, and we range from 18 to 101 across the state this last week. Back to you, Bryce.
All right, thank you very much for that update, Eric. We do appreciate it. Over the past few years, the price for cattle has been going up. This change in market values and higher interest rates is having an impact on that sector, and one question that comes to mind is how cash lease agreements are determined. MarketJournal's Mike Straub is standing by with this story. Mike?
This time of year, as we think about September, October, this is a time of year when frequently folks are thinking about renewing a lease or initiating a lease on a cow-calf share or cash lease agreement. Typically, most cows in Nebraska are spring calving cows, and typically a lease runs from weaning to the following weaning, so it's a production year cycle. And as we look at what's happened with cow values over the last 3 years, breeding cow values have gone up significantly, as have interest rates. And so as we think about either initiating a cow-calf share or cash lease agreement or renewing one, we really need to sit down and figure out what is each party contributing. So from a cow owner perspective, their major contribution is, of course, the cow itself. And then as we think about that cow has value, and so they should expect some return on investment. So two major things have happened. Cow values have gone up. And then also as we look over the last 20 years, interest rates are at a higher place than they have been for quite a while. And so when you increase cow value and you increase interest rate, then what that cow owner should expect to get in terms of either a cash lease or perhaps a share of the calf crop may be higher than it was 3 years ago when those numbers were different. So those are two big drivers for the cow owner, the cow value and interest rates. The next one is replacement rate. So when that cow leaves the herd, if I'm going to maintain the cow herd, I need to bring in a replacement. And so those values have gone up as well. And then of course, when that cow leaves the herd, she has some value, some weigh up value when she goes to market. And so that price has changed also from where it was a couple years ago. So those are major drivers as we look at what the cow owner should get. And so as we think about what their contribution is to the production of weaned calves, either in a share agreement, if the operator is taking care of the cows, providing all the feed, or in a lease agreement, if they're getting a cash income from that cow, that really needs to be calculated and figured out. I think also just with the changes we've seen in these market values.
For the upcoming 2025 year, cow-calf share leases or cash leases should be reviewed. The lease should accurately reflect what each person will contribute to their production of weaned calves and what their compensation should be, either in cash or in a percentage of the calf crop.
So recently with the Center of Ag Profitability, they have a weekly webinar on Thursdays, and we did one on cow-calf share and cash lease, really comparing those two lease options. So in the one scenario, the cow owner is getting a cash amount for the cows, and the other, they're getting a share of the calf crop. So we just walked through and compared and contrasted those two options. If someone's considering one of those things to think through. And we also talked about the cow-calf share lease calculator, which is an Excel-based spreadsheet tool which allows both parties to sit down and say, what am I producing here in terms of what am I contributing to the production of weaned calves? So the cow owner has a contribution, the cow operator has a contribution. We talked already about what the cow owner provides. So the cow operator typically is providing labor, providing equipment, often providing most of the feed, providing management. And so as you look at what both parties contribute, then you need to figure out, okay, how do we compensate each fairly based on that contribution? So that's really what that webinar walked through, things to think through. We also talked about some of those non-monetary values in terms of relationships, integrity. How do you initiate a lease? What are things that should be in a lease? The importance of having that in writing. Providing a document that both the cow owner and operator are clear on what expectations are. How do you terminate a lease? what's some of the legal ramifications you need to be aware of. So we just talk through questions to ask, things to think through. And so if you're thinking about looking at a lease, or if you're looking at renegotiating a lease, I think that webinar is a nice place to go to look at just some conversation to think through, maybe bring up some ideas you hadn't considered before. And then also we share some resources there that are also at the Beef website that folks can go to just help them be informed as they're walking through evaluating, looking at that lease.
To determine what a fair and equitable lease is, it is important both parties accurately determine their level of contribution to the total cost involved in cow-calf production enterprise.
So I think sometimes we can think about our situation and not think about what's the situation the other party's in. So that's where that share lease calculator tool, it really identifies here's all the value that goes into producing a weaned calf. So when each party sees what the other party's contributing, I think it can help them better understand, hey, maybe this is fair, or maybe this is what would be a good agreement based on that. I think another thing is not putting an agreement in writing and not talking it through. So, you know, in Nebraska, rural areas, we value integrity, and the comment often is that the paper is not worth what the signature of the person is if their integrity isn't part of that. And I agree. The nice thing is that a written agreement, though, brings clarity if there's any question around what's happened. So I really encourage folks, put it in writing, make sure you discuss it, and then also in the event of an untimely death of someone, it's clear, here's what we've agreed to. And so it protects both the cow owner and the operator. So putting that in writing is another, I think, really important piece. I think also something that's not discussed is what happens if we can't agree. And that's where I think identifying who's a third-party mediator, who we might bring in, who we both respect, who could act as kind of a go-between, help us think through, we're not in agreement here, how can we work this out amicably? And that's another, I think, important piece.
Annually reviewing cow-calf share or cow-cash lease agreement is prudent under fluctuating market conditions. For cow share or lease agreement to be successful long-term, it must work for all parties involved. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.
Thanks for that information, Mike. If you'd like to learn more on this topic, we've added several links along with this story. Find those over at marketjournal.unl.edu. That is just about all the time we have for this week's show. Do want to remind you, if you missed one of our stories, we post them over on social media as well as on our YouTube account. Both those places where you can join in on the conversation. I want to give a special thank you to the folks from Syngenta for hosting us here at the plant just to the west of Aurora, Nebraska. That includes Ryan Curtis as well as Matt Dolch. We hope to see you back here next time. But until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.